Shouldn't take too long. All right. What's up, everyone? Tyler Dunn at Go Long, and I am joined by the preeminent Pittsburgh Steelers expert beat writer. I'd say, features columns, but what Brian Batko does most here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette are those mailbags. Or, it's almost like a live chat because I
I
love
do
getting
both. I
calls.
do the live chat and the mailbags. So much
That's
reader
right.
engagement.
I mean, it brings me back to those Milwaukee Journal Sentinel days, man, after some of those Packer games where you'd be in that press box until midnight, 1 a.m. I mean, these fans are just flooding it. They want answers, and Steelers fans are no different, which I can't imagine the temperature right now. So let's start right there, Brian. What in the hell do the Pittsburgh Steelers fans want right now at quarterback for this team? We can talk about everything else for hours and hours. Nothing matters if you don't have a quarterback, and they know that
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what team president Art Rooney II said coming into this offseason at a time when I think a lot of fans, rightly or wrongly, fairly or unfairly, were like, hey, Mr. Rooney, your work begins with getting Mike Tomlin out of here somehow and ripping off the Band-Aid, turning a new page at head coach and seeing what happens. Now, that's not the Steelers' way. We know that. Even the most casual of Steelers fan knows that. So it was a rational stance for Rooney to say, no, quarterback's the biggest position, the biggest key for any team, and we need to figure that out. That's probably priority number one. So as I just filed in a story for the Post-Gazette, it's kind of hard to square that with this now very protracted, I don't even know if pursuit is the right word, of Aaron Rodgers, but at this point, saga could be upgraded to Odyssey. Certainly been a long journey since, man, the second day of free agency seems like a really long time ago now. But I'll just tell you this, Tyler, from talking to people at pickup hoops or my kid's t-ball game or at a bar, I've never heard so many Steelers fans just say, why don't we just roll with Mason Rudolph? And I like him. He did well last time he was here late in that 2023 season. He kind of saved the day almost single-handedly down the stretch after the Kenny Pickett fiasco. And his Q rating is at an all-time high here in Pittsburgh. And I really get the sense that people are totally cool with that. And I don't know if it's as much about a belief in Rudolph steadfastly or just the Aaron Rodgers situation has become kind of toxic, and his persona has become one that is not exactly everybody's cup of tea.
How realistic is that? Because look, for all we know, ink has not been put to paper. I'd imagine parameters of an Aaron Rodgers contract are all figured out, and they're just, waiting for him to uh, dismount from the camel across the Sahara Desert, wherever the hell Aaron Rodgers is. Who knows? I guess we'll find out on McAfee. But okay, how realistic is that? That somebody in the building just raises his hand and says, "Mike, Omar, you don't have to do this." Is it an option that they would just roll with Mason Rudolph, Will Howard at this point? Skylar Thompson. Can't forget Skylar Thompson, too.
Can't forget him. That's kind of that was kind of the crux of what I just wrote here, and it'll be up on post-gazette.com shortly. Maybe by the time you're listening to this, it is up there. But it's just, how long is too long to wait? Like, when does it actually become a problem that this thing is not settled? I mean, Mason Rudolph's there at OTAs right now. He's learning the guys. They're learning him. Everybody's saying all the right things. Everybody's walking on eggshells when they get asked about the elephant not in the room, right? So I don't, this scenario that you posited there, like, I just don't think that's going to happen. It's not realistic from a Steelers standpoint because Mike Tomlin drives the bus. I mean, ultimately, Art Rooney II has to sign off on everything, and he is Mike's boss, but he and his father before him, they always gave the utmost trust in the head coach, a delegation sort of way of handling your business. I'm the owner, I'm the team president, I'm at the top, but I hired this guy because I believe in him and I have the utmost confidence in him to do what's right by the team. So I think there does become a drop dead date. When is that? That's where the goalposts keep moving.
Yeah.
First it was They got to get a word from him before the draft, right? Draft comes and goes. Oh, they've got to get him in here by the start of OTAs, right? OTAs beginning, comes and goes. Now the new, I think, cutoff for some people that are still willing to go along with this is mandatory minicamp in a couple weeks, because that is mandatory. However, it's not mandatory for anyone who's not on the team.
Right. That's the genius of it on Aaron's side.
Yeah. So then it'll become, and this is a funny thing, going all the way back to, I can't remember if it was the combine or owners meetings. Oh, it couldn't have been the combine. Mike Tomlin doesn't talk at the combine, so it must have been owners meetings in mid to late March. He got asked about this. That's how long we've been doing this now and on this merry-go-round. And the phrase he used was, training camp is probably the line of demarcation. And then the next time he got asked about that, he sort of walked it back and was like, I didn't mean about Rodgers specifically. I meant for like any player you kind of acquire at it's various points in the off season. That's generally when you got to start working. I happen to think if it's your QB1, you got to shift the parameters a little bit for when this whole process begins in earnest.
And you know what, man? Like, I have so many flashbacks to the summer of 2021. And back then, it was worth the bullshit. Back then, he is, right, I think going into his 4th MVP season, he had held the team hostage for those 3 months, blows up the NFL draft. I think it was the Trevor Lawrence draft, and makes it known through minions and surrogates and allies, I want the hell out of Green Bay. But and you can see Green Bay groveling, bending the knee. Matt LaFleur's press conferences, every time he got up there, it was, almost on the verge of tears. I'm maybe exaggerating a little bit, but begging and pleading, we need this guy back. And meanwhile, he is just saying he wants Brian Gutekunst fired to return. Mark Murphy ain't going to do that. Eventually, he comes back. They let him have the airing of grievances press conference that went so viral then. I guess my point is, I think everybody put up with it because he was still so talented. You knew you had a Super Bowl window. They weren't going to take their infinite amount of picks. And I think the players kind of got it too, most of them. What are those players in that Steelers locker room thinking right now? Because I love everything Mike Tomlin. I love walking into that Steelers locker room, A, because we get to hang out and talk about music and whatnot and our kids. That's always fun. But it's just different in there, man. Even back to James Harrison and Vince Williams and some of those linebackers walking around with a snarl in their lip. It's a different ecosystem. It's old school football. I think what Mike Tomlin has built there, even, building upon what came before him, Cowher and Chuck Noll, it's football is preserved there. There's such a team concept. Cam Hayward kind of said the quiet part out loud back in March, right? When, hey, you either want to be here or you don't. Darius Slay, I don't know if he was referencing Aaron Rodgers, but kind of said how important OTAs are in so many words and that it matters. I can't imagine what they're saying privately or thinking privately, because they saw Aaron. We all saw Aaron Rodgers the last 3 years. At some point, it ain't worth it, right, Brian?
Yeah, I think, I don't want to use a Tomlinism. I don't want to paint with a broad brush and say everybody's annoyed by this or everybody's cool with it. I think, like any locker room, you've got a melting pot of opinions and perspectives. You probably got some guys who are like, man, I grew up loving Aaron Rodgers and thinking he's the best quarterback ever. I can't wait to play with him if he comes here. And I respect, his personal issues that he mentioned, and he can take his time. There's probably some of that. There's probably some guys rolling their eyes, like you're saying, like, what are we doing here? You're holding up the off season for the rest of us in a way. You're putting us in a tricky situation in a way, because beat writers like me are coming down there and asking, what is the vibe of this, or trying to take the pulse of the locker room, because this is just such a bizarre circumstance here. I don't know if it's unprecedented. I'd have to really go back and research, but if your starting quarterback doesn't roll out of bed and show up until the first day of training camp, that's a lot of cramming to do for that week 1 test in a month or so's time. So I think there's probably different thoughts in there. And that's the other interesting thing about this to me, is that I think if you're Rodgers and you do still fully intend on coming, but who knows, maybe you do want to miss this part of the offseason calendar because 2 years ago you got burned, you tweaked your calf with the Jets, and next thing you know, it's week 1 and you're tearing your Achilles. Or last year you got burned because you supposedly informed people you had a pre-planned trip, you weren't going to be there for mandatory minicamp. and it was still a shitstorm in the New York media market. So maybe there is some scarring there. I don't know. I can't speak for him. But if he does get here, you've got kind of two mountains to scale. I mean, you've got to probably ingratiate yourself to these new guys around you, and for some that might be easy, like I said. For some that might be hard, and for some it might never take because they all have their preconceived notions about a guy who's been around this long and has been this high profile for so long. And then you've also got to scale the very basic X's and O's mountain of I think he'll pick up the playbook. Arthur Smith's scheme and what he wants to do. I do feel like Aaron Rodgers will get that down pat quickly. That should be his superpower at this stage of his career. But getting all the code words in and the hand signals and the sixth sense of I'm throwing a no look pass to Mike Williams and I need him on the red line. I mean, those are the type of things that can only happen with so many reps.
Red line.
So that's just going to be that's going to be two pretty big challenges to manage simultaneously, and I just think common sense would be you'd want as much time as possible to do that, but we are living it, and that is not the case so far.
Yeah, this is where my old podcast partner, who knows a hell of a lot more about football than me, Jim Monis, scout, Eagles, scout, Saints, director of personnel with the Bills. He's now the GM of the old Memphis Showboats there in the UFL. He would, this time of year, look, Tyler, OTAs, come on, it's voluntary. These star players don't really need it. Maybe that's true to an extent. I'm not sure you want to be Stephon Diggs on a boat handing out drugs to models on Instagram, and partying in that fashion.
Allegedly? Do we know it wasn't Fun Dip or something?
Right. It might have been Pop Rocks. Could have been some Fun Dip. That's very true. Which would have been, I mean, really, what a 180 that'd be. He just shows up with Mike Vrabel, joint press conference, and busts out the Fun Dip. I don't know though, man. All I know is Patrick Mahomes is putting in that work in Tyler, Texas, I believe, and they had to work with all these young receivers. He's doing extra stuff in the offseason. Tom Brady's always doing the extra stuff. Aaron Rodgers just has never been that maniacal, win at all costs kind of quarterback. Always supremely talented, diabolical, at his prime. Maybe nobody was better at playing the position. He's not obsessed with winning like those two. And it hurts. Right? When Green Bay traded Devontae Adams in 2022, they draft Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, these young receivers. He's skipping stuff in the offseason because that's the next year after Green Bay just basically said, okay, we'll take you back, do whatever the hell you want. And they paid him more money. They didn't say anything, and it showed on the field. They got off to a slow start. They weren't on the same page. I mean, you could say the same thing with the Jets. There is an effect to not being around this time of year and not practicing this time of year because training camp isn't the old training camp that I even grew up on when I first started covering the league. It flies by. You can only do so much, even if you're a veteran like Aaron Rodgers, but also he kind of has to evolve. I mean, he can't do the stuff that he once did. He hasn't been a good quarterback in 4 years. That's my rambling way to get to a question, I promise. Offensively, with Arthur Smith and what the Steelers want to do, you say that he should pick up those X's and O's. One thing he did well, though, with the Jets was the quick game stuff. He can't move like he once did, right? He's not going to be outrunning anybody around the edge. But he could spit the ball out kind of quick to Garrett Wilson. Can he do that stuff with the Steelers? It doesn't seem like the Steelers have the personnel, really, to fit maybe what he does best at this point of his career. DK Metcalf's a freak, but he's not necessarily,
uncover quickly.
Based.
Yeah, right. So the Steelers don't. Yeah, I mean, they don't have anybody proven necessarily in that sense. Calvin Austin, I really like him, and he took a big step up last year. But he's always going to be a 5'8" guy trying to thrive as a receiver in this league. Roman Wilson, last year's third-round pick, his rookie season was completely lost basically by. He goes down on kind of a hip drop tackle type thing, ankle sprain, first day of pads in training camp, and he was playing catch up ever since. So I think there's some level of conviction in those guys, and the Steelers trusting their evaluations of this is what we drafted these dudes to do. But yeah, I mean, they signed Robert Woods, not the move I would have made coming off the draft, knowing full well that you might turn around and trade George Pickens, which they did. He's also not necessarily that move the chains possession type of guy either. Deontay Johnson used to be that for him, and he's long gone. So I don't know if there's another shoe to drop there. You know, they were linked to Johnny Smith yesterday from Adam Schefter, I believe, which is kind of the least surprising Arthur Smith development ever. Um, but, you know, Pat Freiermuth, he's really good at, you know, making those tough catches over the middle. So, I mean, there are reliable players for Rodgers to go to if this all comes together. But, yeah, there's still going to be questions about the fit and, you know, maybe to go back to Tomlin and kind of what you were getting at there before. I wouldn't say you were rambling. I was enjoying listening to it, but Rodgers and his, you know, lack of the Brady gene, if you want to call it that, you know, I think Tomlin could be attracted to Rodgers from we've both got something to prove standpoint. The rest of the NFL watching world is writing us off as it's time to move on. It's gotten stale. You don't have your fastball anymore. Just being around Tomlin for the 6 going on 7 seasons that I have now, I feel like that's kind of what drives him, is like those intangible things that the Steelers fan base, for the most part, I think I don't blame them. They want more tangible solutions. And I think you put it well in your latest piece that his inability to nail down the quarterback position post Ben has really been rough. And I know you call it a blind spot. That's probably a fair term. It's also, I mean, it's a blind spot for a lot of people, to be fair. It's the trickiest thing to figure out, I think. And it's the most important thing to figure out in the sport. And if you don't, you know, you could be a really good coach who we never even hear about because you never got that break, or you never found that guy, or you never developed that guy. So it's easier said than done, but it's almost like, you know, this is that final boss that he hasn't been able to beat yet. So will he with Rodgers? It seems unlikely, but, you know, there's that aspect of it. And maybe it's just more of also a cold and calculating, hey, getting this guy at $10 million this year, if that's truly what he plays for, I mean, that's the best bargain potentially outside of rookie contract guys, or this side of Russell Wilson on the vet minimum contract last season.
And it's like, man, you did that though last off season. I mean, they were praised nationally, it seemed, for the Justin Fields acquisition, Russell Wilson, getting these guys on the cheap, but you get what you pay for at that position. And eventually it showed. They had a ceiling. And you know me, Brian, like I've been anything like an apologist to the extreme when it comes to Mike Tomlin, just because I love that old school coaching, the environment, all the little things matter. I mean, I'll never forget being around that 2019 team. They have every reason to quit, to just, you know, check out on the season. Losing Roethlisberger, down to Devlin, the Duck Hodges, and I think they won 7 of 8. Going to that Buffalo game in prime time Sunday night, they were 8-5 with Duck Hodges.
Correct, yeah.
That's unbelievable, and that's coaching, and all of that stuff matters in a violent game. 22 moving parts. You've got to maximize every ounce of ability in your players. I know it sounds kind of corny cliche, but he has kind of tapped into something. If you could only find a quarterback, if you could only nail down that position, we're having a much different conversation about Mike Tomlin. I know you can say that about a lot of coaches, but him especially. And this could probably take hours, but if you could go back to the end of Ben, in retrospect, in hindsight, what could the Steelers have done at the quarterback position? Obviously, they hung on to him a little too long. I mean, the offense was kind of relegated to some pop flies to Chase Claypool, right? And even then, they're winning games and managing.
Not to mention Matt Canada was the coordinator and the play caller, who in retrospect may have been vastly underqualified to do that job at the NFL level.
Burying the lead, right? That's it. Hanging on the loyalty to Matt Canada just really poisoned the offense in the quarterback position. But was there a quarterback that realistically could have been acquired, drafted? I can't even remember exactly where they were picking, if it was even a conversation. Because look, teams like the Steelers, even the Saints with Breeze, it behooves you to maybe find that quarterback a year early, piss off your Hall of Famer, and that's what Green Bay has done twice, and it's worked out. I don't know why more teams don't do it. What could they have done?
Well, they sort of did piss off Ben when they drafted Mason Rudolph in the third round in
Right, if you're gonna piss him off with a third rounder, just do with a first rounder.
2018. No, I mean, I'm glad you asked this because I literally just did an entire episode of my podcast, Chip Tam and Football, from the Post-Gazette YouTube channel. If anybody wants to check it out, With my co-host was Arthur Moats, former Bill, let's go Bills, and former Steelers linebacker. He's so good at this, and he's such a good talker, and we had fun going down what I called a quarterback time machine trip for the Steelers, because you're right. It's so easy for any of us to sit here and say, this is horrendous. This is a farce. This is embarrassing that this is where they are. But like, do you have any other reasonable routes that they could have taken? Let's go back and look. So, I think the one big what if that people always come back to is that same Mason Rudolph draft when Lamar Jackson was there at the end of the first round. And, there's a lot of different hypotheticals there. I mean, even if they take him, do they incorporate him the way the Ravens did, or would Ben not have wanted to come off the field at times? Does Ben still, injure his arm in 2019? That's some real butterfly effect stuff. Maybe we never even see Lamar playing quarterback if he ends up in Pittsburgh instead of Baltimore. But that's the first one that people always circle. I'll even bring up that 2019 season that you raved about as far as what Tomlin was able to do. And this is one I didn't get into with Moats necessarily, but somebody pointed it out to me after the fact. It's like that season, if you remember, they traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick right after Ben went down. And a lot of people, of course, at the time, it's like brilliant. I mean, that guy's absolutely worth a first-round pick. He's a game-changing safety. I think he was all pro that year. He was a big reason why they were able to stay afloat with that defense playing the way that it did. However, if you don't do that, you hold on to that first-round pick. Let's say Minkah's not creating interceptions and fumbles left and right. Maybe you end that Tomlin non-losing streak and the Steelers non-losing streak, because it actually does predate him. It goes all the way back to Ben's first year. And maybe you just kind of bottom out a little bit and you end up with Justin Herbert in that next draft. I mean, it's a thing that could have happened. So, I mean, that's one of the more outlandish ones, because I'm sure that team
still outlandish. Were they 1-4 when they traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick?
They traded for him sooner than that. They may have been 0-2. They lost their first two games.
Yeah.
Rudolph, I want to say Minkah and his debut was the same week as Mason Rudolph's first start against the Niners in San Fran. I'm pretty sure that's correct off the top of my head.
Definitely fell to 1-4, then won 7 of 8 with the Duck and Rudolph.
Yeah, and Mason in and out, and I mean, million different insane things happened to Mason Rudolph that year. Talk about a star-crossed.
Myles Garrett tried to decapitate him on
Earl Thomas pretty much did decapitate him, and he had to walk off the field with his face mask severed, and no working cart at what was then Heinz Field. So yeah, I mean, I digress, but I mean, you still, if you were the Steelers at that time, you're still probably banking on Ben wants to keep playing. Ben wants to rehab. Ben wants to show that he can come back from this injury. What would the dynamic have been like with Herbert around and Rudolph was still around? So I don't know. I mean, that's one that's got a lot of different layers to it. But I mean, even the next year, Jalen Hurts was available in the second round. They took Chase Claypool to kind of be another piece, maybe a piece to put the offense over the top if Ben was able to come back strong and look like his old self. So, I mean, those are a few of the ones. I do think that, signing Mitch Trubisky right away in free agent. I mean, he was literally the first domino to fall post Ben. Was let's go out and sign Mitch and try to, get this reclamation project to take us somewhere, or at least be a bridge. And then they draft Kenny Pickett, and this is kind of where the snowball started rolling downhill, and not in a good way.
I love a good counterfactual, and I don't really think it's that far-fetched. And it kind of gets to the heart of the matter here too, Brian, when it comes to Mike Tomlin running the show with Pittsburgh Steelers. And it's so funny. 2019, I think we had just had Ella, our first child, and it was like the first road trip I was taking. I went down to Pittsburgh 2 or 3 different times.
Yeah, you were around a lot that year, I recall.
Yeah. That's kind of when we probably first connected. And I wrote a story at Bleacher Report on how they just refused to quit that year. You go back to training camp, the receivers coach died tragically.
Yeah, I think you were there at training camp that year too, right?
Yeah, I drove
Yeah.
down to Latrobe, and I think it was that morning he passed
Yeah, that's
away.
where we first met, no doubt. I remember the cafeteria up at St. Vincent
Yeah,
College in Latrobe, PA. And yeah, I can't remember if that was before or after Daryl Drake,
Daryl
tragically
Drake.
passed away. But yeah, I mean that was a crazy summer for them as well. It was also first summer post AB. There was a
Yeah,
quote, I think cleansing was the word that Mike Tomlin used, and Le'Veon Bell was officially off the books, even though he didn't play the previous season. So yeah, there was a lot going on.
yeah. And so when he's the one in charge, and the Steelers are Tomlin is the Steelers, everything's kind of woven together. You get a season like that where you fight and you claw and you win games you have no business winning. But I think there is value to. I don't know what's better. I really don't know. But there is a value to a general manager really having that final say, and maybe thinking a year or two down the line, right? Like, because they're gonna dispatch their personnel staff and the scouts and be like, okay, I want you all to scout the next quarterback class like crazy, like that's our goal. That conversation is had, August, September, whatever, and you're thinking 5 moves ahead. You're thinking about that class of Burrow and Herbert and Tua and Hurts and Love, all that kind of stuff. Whereas a coach, it's like, man, you are so day to day, just in general. You're grinding. You're waking up at 3, 4 a.m. You're getting on the treadmill. You're running for 5 miles. You're thinking about the day, and the Steelers kind of embody that, right? They win all these grimy games, and Miles Killebrew's blocking a punt, and T.J. Watt's swatting out a pass to the line of scrimmage, and they're winning 13-9. And I love those kind of wins, but it's that was probably the moment. And I know it's all hindsight. I get it. But that's probably what it takes for a team like the Steelers to kind of get out of this 10-9-8 win territory. Purgatory is a little strong, but to take that leap at this point, you might need to take a step back and start forecasting a bit down the road.
I think purgatory is a fair word for it. I mean, I think that's what Steelers fans feel like they're in. I mean, this is, yeah, compared to the Jets or, even the Giants of late, those fan bases would be happy to be making the playoffs and at least being in the dance. But for this organization and this city, I mean, the standard's higher, and they're very angry that they haven't won a playoff game in 8 years. So, I mean, I think purgatory is fair, and that to me is probably the needle that they're trying to thread right now. Is Mike Tomlin basically wears both hats. He's the day-to-day coach who, yeah, he's not worrying about the 2026 quarterback class when he shows up to OTAs on Tuesday and is barking at first-round pick Derek Harmon that it starts up front every day. So, he's doing that, but we know when the offseason begins, he's down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. He is in these guys' back pockets, being a football junkie and putting on that player evaluator hat. So I never like when I hear the notion nationally that, oh, he's just working with the ingredients the front office gives him, and what are you going to do? Come on, guys, give Mike a little bit more to work with. Like, no, that is not the case. But I think the way it's working right now, and again, the needle they're trying to thread or the balance they're trying to strike, Mike's doing his thing. Perhaps he thinks Aaron Rodgers is the right guy for the job at the moment to take a step forward to win a playoff game, whereas general manager Omar Khan is by necessity thinking a little bit more long term, a little more analytically, like, all right, if we do 1 year with Rodgers, we might have to deal with some sideshow stuff, but it's not the end of the world. It's not like you're committing a huge contract to the guy. We're still going to keep our eye on the prize, that quarterback class next year. They've stacked a bunch of comp picks projected, of course. They got the pick from Dallas for George Pickens, and maybe they've got ammunition to move up if they have to, because the Bills, they didn't tank when they got Josh Allen. The Chiefs didn't tank when they got Patrick Mahomes. They wisely, probably a little bit of luck involved too, surely a little bit of luck involved too, found the right guys, target them, moved up and got them, and the rest is history. So I think the Steelers would love for a situation like that to play out for them.
And I think that number of Steeler fans who would just like to roll with Mason Rudolph is going to grow each day. Aaron Rodgers doesn't sign it. I don't think that's outlandish either. Like I said it last year in September with the Jets. Tyrod Taylor could win more games as a starting quarterback. You, maybe Mason Rudolph even wins you more games, but at least you're not going to deal with any of the unforeseen batshit weirdness off the field headlines, and you know that Mike Tomlin doesn't like those.
Then again, though, I mean, he's got thick enough skin. Like, what hasn't he dealt with? You know, what hasn't he dealt with at this point in his career? He might be like, what are all the Tomlinisms we heard about this from every year? That's a pebble in my shoe, or that's a you guys are like vultures. It's so. I mean, from that sense, like he's almost immune to some of that. But I'm with you. Like you've been around Rodgers infinitely more than me. I just see it from the outside, and it's like, if you're the Steelers and you're this front office or you're the team brass, I mean, it's kind of like what do coaches tell players? Control what you can control. You can't necessarily guarantee that you're going to come down with that contested catch in the end zone, or you're going to be able to block Myles Garrett off the edge, but control your effort, control your preparation and the mental aspect of it. And it's like they could control what they do this offseason in terms of who they do and don't try to enter business with. And they have made this bed for themselves, essentially, if any of this goes haywire. That's the other thing. I mean, I think if Rodgers does sign here, well, it's not like that's the end of the drama. That could just be the beginning of the drama. Who knows?
You're in a division with Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. You're in a conference with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Who knows? Maybe C.J. Stroud bounces back in year 3 and is starting to look like he deserves to be in that class. Maybe it's Trevor Lawrence. Maybe Tua catches fire. Maybe Drake May becomes a star. This conference is loaded at the quarterback position, and I think
you didn't even mention the Browns.
Well, I was going to get to those Cleveland Browns. I think that's what's horrifying. Like the Cleveland Browns have more of a plan at quarterback. This is what I started that column with. Correct me if I'm insane. Please do. I spent a little time around those Browns, and look, it's not exactly a sight to behold when you're standing there on the practice field and you see Joe Flacco and our old pal Kenny Pickett. I'm not giving up on my guy Kenny Pickett either.
You still got a little bit of real estate on Pickett Island. You've got a little hut. You've got a little bungalow on Pickett Island. Like you go there. Me and
Filipponi, we're just gonna post up there.
I don't know if Pony's still there though.
Oh, that's right. I think he got off. Right.
He exited. I think he nuked an entire mansion on Pickett Island.
We had some old battles back at Syracuse and Media Cup. Daily Orange versus WAER Radio. We didn't even know each other really that well, but man, we had some good battles on the hardwood. Yeah, but I'm looking at this Browns practice, and you see Flacco, you see Pickett, you see the Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel. Almost said Taylor Gabriel there, and but there's I can follow the logic of the Browns at quarterback. They're finally, I mean, they still got to pay Deshaun Watson, but finally moving off of him as a starting quarterback. They probably loved Cam Ward. You have to think that's what Myles Garrett was referencing in the Andrew Siciliano interview with the team. I kind of know what we're doing here at quarterback. Titans weren't going to move off that pick. So then, okay, they pivot, get Flacco on the cheap, Pickett on the cheap, draft a couple quarterbacks. You trade down. I didn't love the trade because I think Travis Hunter's a stud, but I get it. Like, you get a first-round pick next year there. If Jacksonville stinks, you've got a lot of draft capital to then go quarterback hunting next year. Everybody kind of see the plan, love it, hate it. There's a plan. I don't know what the hell the Steelers' plan is. In this conference, with these quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers, who hasn't been good since 2021, Mason Rudolph, we've seen a ton. I don't know. You tell me. Do the Browns?
I don't know if I agree with you on the Browns. I'm pretty confused by what the Browns are doing. I thought the Dylan Gabriel pick was brutal. I can't see that guy holding up an AFC North December football whatsoever. And then to turn around and then also use a pick on Shedeur. I mean, that was confusing. I think if their plan is to just stink even worse than anyone else in the AFC and draft a quarterback in next year's
class. Steeler fans would probably there's probably a contingent of Steeler fans that would like that, right?
Yes.
They would like that plan.
There's a little bit of like
it's a
Steelers
plan.
And Browns in unison there. Their fan bases both eyeing various players to come out next season when the draft is in Pittsburgh, I might add. So I mean, even this offseason, like two guys we've barely even mentioned on this hangout is Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. Like the Steelers had the inside track on both. And I'll say my piece on these two really quick is I guess I would call myself, I was sort of a Fields guy. I was still sort of a Fields can put it all together believer. The price at which the Jets got him, definitely I would have been a little hesitant to match that. But I wouldn't have crushed the Steelers if they did. I really think you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, even pivoting away from Fields in the first place when they were 4-2, and it looked great immediately. It looked like one of the most genius strokes of brilliance from Mike Tomlin in his entire coaching career. It was like, here's his signature moment now, post Ben as a head coach, as he believed in Russell Wilson coming off the calf injury, and look at the Steelers go until they didn't. And then it was just another completely lost, wasted year. You don't have a Fields, full clear picture by which to judge other than 6 games. You could have at least tried to develop him a little bit more in year 2 with an offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, in this case. And then I know a lot of people, our boy Moats included, another pop for Arthur Moats. I mean, he was all, and I think Bill Cowher was in this camp as well. Was, why don't you just re-sign Russell Wilson if you're going to do the whole Rodgers dalliance? But I'll say that I think it had gotten too toxic. I think there was just too much butting of heads with Russ and Arthur Smith and maybe more members of the coaching staff. And it just, I mean, Russ is kind of his whole other, I mean, he and Aaron Rodgers are both kind of celebrity avatar quarterbacks at this point in their lives. But, I just don't think Russ was as good of a schematic fit. And, that essentially, like, there was no going back to him, even if it would have made all the sense in the world on paper, financially, and just from the guy wants to be here standpoint. I mean, he's not going to cause all of the consternation with your fans. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, I think, is, he's been a cool guy at times in his career. He's had a little charisma, and he's been kind of like savvy vet type. But I think Russell Wilson's probably more purely just likable and obviously inoffensive nowadays.
Inoffensive is a very good word. Yes, unless that dangerous Subway commercial offended you, which I would understand. It was a little creepy. You know what? I wish he would have leaned into that. I really wish. Instead of Subway should have leaned into it, Russ should have leaned into it. And everybody was kind of giving him shit for that. Just own it. Just own it completely. Like, don't turn back. But
it was interesting being around Russ for a year in the locker. I mean, he, like, for as phony as everybody says he is, and I don't know if he is or isn't. I'm not one of his teammates or whatever, but like, he was an eternal optimist. He'd come bounding into the locker room and, hey, what's up, guys? And everybody doing well. And it's like, you couldn't help but smile a little bit and remember to manifest good thoughts. And I can't imagine how much the script is going to flip if Aaron comes in here as the successor to Russ.
That's a good point. I talked to him in Seattle once. This is a while ago, but all these teammates, whether they liked him or didn't like him, they did insist it wasn't phony. I mean, that's who he is. He really is genuinely just an optimistic, love life.
Yeah, phony's probably the wrong word. Corny, family. Maybe, or like,
right.
Over the top. Yeah.
Yeah, you can do worse out of your starting quarterback, but I guess we see how this ends. And you know what? At the end of the day, I think you nailed it earlier, Brian, when you said, like, Mike Tomlin is probably looking at this as, join me, Aaron. Let's shut up, everybody. Let's prove them all wrong. Let's cement our legacies. Let's go do it. And, hey, I guess it's not out of the realm of possibility. Leroy Butler, Hall of Famer, believes he thinks the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to go to the Super Bowl and maybe even win it if Aaron Rodgers is their quarterback. I don't see it. Do you? What are the odds? All right, Aaron Rodgers is the starting quarterback with this roster, with this team, with these coaches, and that division. How do things end for Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2025?
I mean, I honestly don't even know that in their heart of hearts they're like shooting for the pipe dream that you just laid out. I think it'd be more like, can we just get a playoff win for TJ Watt one time in Pittsburgh? Like, can Cam Hayward win one more play? I don't even know I can't remember if Cam's been on the field for a playoff win. He's been on the team since they've won one. But I almost feel like that's the more realistic goal they're shooting for. And what I always tell people is, like, to go back to our original kind of what we were tossing back and forth here is like, with the ceiling with Mason Rudolph, maybe it's 10 or 11 wins. The ceiling with Aaron Rodgers, maybe it's 11 or 12 wins. Like, that's how I view this whole thing, and why, again, I come back to, I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze anymore with this. So I'll just, I don't mind making a prediction. I'll go on record and just say, I think Rodgers signs, I'll go ahead and guess after mini camp, because it's just you're giving yourself a very small window to hit. If you say he's going to sign before mandatory mini camp, you basically need to get this thing done, mid to late next week, and then get on a plane and head out here from the West Coast and get his jersey on, figure out where he's staying, and go hit the field. So I'll say he waits till after mandatory minicamp. Wouldn't it be the most Rodgers thing ever if that in between time where, like, not much is happening in the NFL, everyone's gone their separate ways, some random defensive tackle signs over here, some random wide receiver over here gets traded for a 6th-round pick, and then boom, Aaron Rodgers is signing with the Steelers. I feel like that's kind of that would be kind of fitting, I think. But so I'll say that's the timing of it all, Tyler. And until I see otherwise, I'm going to just keep predicting this. I think the Steelers go 10-7 and probably narrowly miss the playoffs in the AFC. I'm not predicting a losing season for them until I see it. I'll be a year late on that. But I'm also not predicting them getting over the hump until I see it. That's exactly where they are stuck in neutral.
And it was a good draft. I thought they had a good draft. Harmon,
Yeah.
Caleb Johnson, you use that second on DK Metcalf. You can always talk yourself into 9, 10, 11 wins with the Pittsburgh Steelers, even, with a Tales from the Crypt Aaron Rodgers under center. I don't know, man. I don't know. I can't. I always find a way to get optimistic about the Steelers. Can't see it with this quarterback, but we'll see. We'll let it play out. It'll be fun for you, right? Covering this team day to day, dealing with chaos.
I don't know. There'll always be something to write, of course. There'll always be a hot topic under center, but I don't necessarily want to have to devote X amount of hours to my life throughout the season to watch, the sit down on McAfee or whatever else might pop up and become kind of a stenographer for those appearances. So, I wouldn't necessarily be looking forward to that, but I mean, hey, never a dull moment, I guess, with the Steelers. Well, it was kind of dull at quarterback for a while, and they weren't interesting and they weren't particularly good as a result. So again, maybe Tomlin figures, hey, we were boring for a little. Let's be interesting again. Let's be dangerous.
And you know what? You said it was a pipe dream to consider this a Super Bowl contender. Maybe when Aaron signs, he just gathers all the beat writers around and y'all do some ayahuasca. You actually do fill the pipe with something there. I'm sure he'd have a few ideas, and they can all get on board.
I'd be scared. I'd be scared to do that. But
yeah. Or Stephon Diggs, right? To bring a full circle. He's got some.
Oh, geez. No, I mean, I've heard, Rodgers, I feel like he'll be kind of cool on a day-to-day basis with us. Like, he's been there and done that with everything. I mean, literally nothing should faze him at this stage of his career. He's been through all the negativity possible, potential career-ending injuries. So, from that standpoint, I don't, Ben could be prickly to deal with for sure by the end. So, I don't know how that'll all go, but and it sounds like he finds little anecdotes with teammates and gets little running gags with guys and stuff like that. So, I don't think there's going to be any sort of blatant friction, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see him report to the dorms at St. Vincent College if that's the way this thing goes, and get a little old school, get a little old fashioned with it.
This was awesome. Brian Batko, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Please plug your podcast, plug your work, any stories you're working on. What a pleasure to have you here sharing your brain with our readers and viewers.
Thanks for having me on. It's just my name on Twitter, Brian Batko, and post-gazette.com/Steelers probably takes you to all of our stuff. Like I mentioned, I've got another Rodgers piece up, just kind of talking about the timing of all this. My most recent feature was on one Mark Bruner and his son, Carson Bruner. You may have read the man featured in this book here, former Steelers tight end. So Pittsburgh drafted his son Carson out of Washington this year in the 7th round. So did a little story on what that was like for father and son to be coworkers now. So yeah, go check it out.
Yeah, I can't wait to read that. When that pick went down, I was like, oh my God, I can't imagine what it's like in the Bruner household right now. So everybody, do yourself a favor, read this man right here. He is filled with Steelers AFC North wisdom and then some. Thanks so much for hanging out, Brian.
Yeah, my pleasure. See you, Tyler.
See you, man.